So hello and welcome to this morning's webinar on the 7 steps to ensuring that your print estate is GDPR compliant. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, just post them up and I'll try and answer them at the end. And today I'm going to highlight the key security risks and the vulnerabilities and go through the 7 steps that you can implement immediately after this webinar to ensure that your print estate is GDPR compliant. So what is the weakest link in your IT infrastructure? Well, we actually believe it's your printers. So when you purchase a printer, you've got potentially 250 settings that are effectively open on that machine. So the machine arrives into your organization and all the protocols, all the settings and the default passwords are all set to default. So there's a massive and potential risk there to yourselves when you purchase a new printing device. GDPR, I suppose at this stage, most people, and we've all heard of GDPR, the term. It was adopted on the 27th of April 2016, and as we know, it's going to come into effect on the 25th of May 2018. And the clock is ticking now to make sure that you're GDPR compliant. The main differences with GDPR coming in, data leaks may result in fines of up to 20 million euros or 4% of your global turnover. The obligation now is on you to notify the data regulators if there is a breach, and you have to report it within 72 hours after you discover the breach. And when we're talking about multifunction devices, MFDs, or single function printers, you have to be aware that there's an awful lot of devices out there in the marketplace today that are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they would have hard disk drives on them and they won't have any erase functionality on them or encryption, and potentially a latent image of everything that's photocopied, printed or scanned can reside on that hard disk drive. So in the event that the hard drive is removed from the machine or you trade that MFD out of your organization, there is a potential risk there and risk of data loss that can be attributed from taking that hard drive from your machine and then accessing those files from the hard disk drives. So Ergo conducted their own GDPR primary research survey in May with senior IT people, and this is what you told us, that over 43% of companies believe that the GDPR requires a substantial change, and you also told us that 32% of you described your understanding as poor. So yet people understand that the term GDPR, but the full understanding and the implications of it and failing and data breaches and how it affects yourselves, your understanding of it is poor. My name's Dave Carty. I'm the Technical Solutions Manager with Ergo, and I'm in the managed print business for over 20 years now. Initially when I started as a field service engineer back in the early 90s, mid 90s, photocopiers where there was no such thing as an MFD. So you had a photocopier, you had a printer, you had a fax and you had a scanner, and none of them were linked, so they're all their own separate entities. And then towards the mid 90s, late 90s, MFDs started to evolve. So the printing functionality was added to the photocopier, and then scanning was added and fax was added to it. And one of the first, when I started to get involved in print security, one of the first risks that we were identifying and that was coming to us was the ability to access a network through a fax cable, obviously through the fax card that was attached to the MFD, where the MFD sat as an printer endpoint on your network. And one of the concerns were that you could access the fax card and then ultimately access the network. And then as we evolved and as we're evolving constantly with print, the likes of HP brought out encryption on their universal print drivers, also known as UPDs, and they've added extra layers of security. And nowadays your multifunction device is no longer a printer, copier, scanner or fax. It's a gateway into workflows. So we'll integrate with SharePoint and all the applications, and there's pull print solutions and software that sits and further enhances the security on your devices. And nowadays when we look at MFDs, we regard them very similar to what you would regard a PC or workstation. It has an operating system, it has a hard disk drive, it's got RAM inside it, and it's got motherboards, and it is very similar to what you would find in your PCs. So I write regular blogs on print security for Ergo, and I've been interviewed in a number of newspaper articles in the Sunday Business Post and Tech Central in relation to print security and how print security is evolving and what we can actually do today to ensure that our devices are more secure, they're locked down, and they're brought into the fold. I suppose we can't really move into the webinar without mentioning the recent WannaCry virus attack that had major impact on the National Health Service in the UK and the Health Service Executive in Ireland. And I suppose even more so now with the recent attack that happened yesterday afternoon and has affected a number of large organisations across Europe. And again, with the recent breach, the patch came out in March and it hasn't been applied to certain systems. And it really goes back to your MFDs as well and your networks. And like I say, with your printers, they are like PCs and they have to be treated like your laptops, your servers. The recent printer breaches that we have had this year, Stack Overflow basically hit 150,000 printers using the LPD protocol on port 515, and he pushed out an ASCII file to all these, basically threw it out there, and he hit 150,000 printers. He was looking for Bitcoin ransomware, but he was actually quite shocked in the number of devices that he actually hit, and then kind of scaled back on it. And I know at the time Twitter and social media went into meltdown where home users were saying, oh, look what's printed out on my printer, and people in their business and their organization actually saw the ASCII files printing out on their devices. And again, when we go back, and I mentioned at the start, the 250 plus settings that can be manipulated, that was one particular protocol that he went through. And if it wasn't being used within your organization, it should have been disabled. Last year we had the 29,000 public IP addresses across a US college campus. Only at this time, politically sensitive material basically printed out on these the printers in this college campus, and it went straight across the whole campus. And again, we also had the recent printer breach, which basically happened in Aalborg, where their systems were disabled and encrypted with ransomware. Their IT infrastructure needed to be replaced because of it. And this happened because they went through a label printer that was attached to an XP workstation. And through there, they actually accessed their network and hit the point of sales machines. It took over 2 weeks for that to be rectified, and it actually cost them roughly around 360,000 euros at the time to rectify it. If you bring that into next year, and with the way GDPR is going to change, it's going to have a massive difference and costs, and then the implications on the organizations because of it. So the printing risks. What are the printing risks? So first of all, we start with the storage media. And when we're talking about storage media, we're talking about the hard disk drives that are in your MFDs and your single function printers. And they can hold a wealth of sensitive information on those hard disk drives. And again, like I said, the older the machines, the more data that can actually be on those hard disk drives. So if they're not encrypted and they're not set to auto erase, there's potential a wealth of knowledge there. Capture. When we talk around capture, we're talking around scanning. And if you imagine, users have the ability, if you're just using an SMTP server and you're not using authentication, potentially users can send emails outside of your organization, and it's an easy way to get a hard copy document sent electronically from your organization that they can send on to different organizations that they have. Or even worse, if you're using your internet service provider as your SMTP gateway, well then you know as the documents leave, they're going up to the ISP and coming back in. And again, there's a massive risk there and for data loss. Your input trays. When we talk around input trays, we're talking about the physical paper trays that are on a machine, and they can hold special media, can be tampered with or stolen. So again, if you're using special media like check print paper, or if the media has a serial number and it's a serial numbered item, again, what way do you lock down those paper trays, or do you have the media stored in cabinets and only certain people have access to it? But it is another risk that the media can be tampered with or even stolen. The output tray is one of the major risks that you're going to have. I'm sure within your organizations now, if you walk by your MFDs or your printers, you've seen, if you're not going to see, a build up of paper where users will accidentally click file and print a number of times. They'll walk up, collect the document, the one that they want, and then leave the second or third document sitting there because they don't actually need it. Or where they photocopied 20 pages instead of two, and they take the two sets and they leave the other 20s in the finisher or the output tray of the machine. Again, another thing is if the machine jams and they don't clear the paper jam and they walk away and someone else clears the paper jam and then it prints off the remaining document in the output tray. Output trays will hold a wealth of knowledge, and again, it's for data loss, and you will see it on the cabinets and the tables beside your machines. When we talk about mobile printing, you should have a mobile print policy in place if you're going to introduce bring your own devices into your network or attach them to your MFDs or single function printers. So if you're going to have bring your own devices like your tablets or your phones, you should have a clear policy. Are they going to be outside of your network or inside of your network? And again, it's the same for cloud as well. If you're going to cloud print, what way are you going to implement them? What security settings are you going to put in place? When we talk about the control panel, we're actually talking about a user or a individual, a cyber criminal or an attacker, being able to physically walk up to the MFD, access the control panel because it's not secure. And once they're in the control panel, they're effectively into the machine. So they can change the protocols, they can enable ports, they can disable ports, they can change IP addresses, they can change the SMTP server name. They're effectively inside your machine, where if they want to enable a particular port or protocol to subsequently leave the building, come back in and attack, they can do that. And you have to be aware of your control panels and how you actually lock them down. When we talk around the network, we're talking around your printing. So when you click file and print, as the document goes from your workstation through the server to the printer, as it travels across a network, the jobs can be intercepted as they travel. And one of the things we do in our security workshops, we install Wireshark and we have it monitoring the print job. So in the example that we use, the user is using basically print. So they click file and print, and when the job sits on the hard drive of the MFD, and when they go over to the device, they type in a 4-digit PIN number, and then the document's deleted and they go away with the document. By using Wireshark, you can monitor and you can actually see the username and the password, the 4-digit number, in plain text that they're actually using. And then from there, you now have where the user thinks that job is secure. The attacker now has the username and password that they can actually go over, release those print jobs themselves and take them from the device. So again, you have to be aware of how you actually are monitoring and what you're doing to put in place for jobs as they travel across a network. Management, the undetected security gap. So like I said earlier, 250 potential settings can be manipulated, changed, turned off, enabled, disabled. You have to look at these as security gaps, and again you have to see which protocols you don't want to use, which settings you're not using, and then if the MFD can have a password for the control panel, the embedded web page, PJL files, whatever it may be, are you going to implement that to make to close the potential security gaps that are going to be there through that endpoint? And then finally, one of the big risks that we see would be your BIOS and your firmware. So your firmware is effectively the operating system that's on your MFD or your single function printer. And if you look on YouTube, you'll actually see an example of where an attacker attacks a particular manufacturer's machine, and they install the game Doom onto the up panel. So when users actually went up to access the MFD, the game basically appeared on the control panel. And again, it was shown as an example a number of years ago of what could be done with firmware. And again, when we're conducting our security audits, we've gone into organizations where their print fleet would be 7-8 years old, and they would still have the original firmware on that machine that was launched 8 years ago, and no security patches have been applied to that particular firmware. So what are the 7 steps to ensuring that your print estate is GDPR compliant? Step 1, include print in your corporate security policy. So most organizations will have a corporate security policy in place, but now you need to bring print into that fold. You need to include print into that corporate security policy that you have in place. You need to assess your print fleet and the security on a regular basis. So don't disable the protocols and the ports that you're not using. put in the username and passwords, and then set and forget. You constantly need to review, and much the same you review your corporate security policy for your PCs, your servers, and your workstations. You need to do this the exact same thing for your print fleet. And by doing so, you're going to start to harden and lock down those potential security gaps that reside in the management layer on your printer. Step 2, end user education and adoption. So execute a staff print awareness and training program. So again, make your staff aware of the potential risks of leaving uncollected hard copy documents on the output tray of your printers and your MFDs, because they're not going to be aware of it, that the information that they may hold. Implement a secure recycling policy. So have the secure recycling bins beside the MFDs and the printer. So in the event that a user accidentally prints too many pages or photocopies too many pages, they can actually put them in the secure recycling bin and they'll be destroyed. One example we have is a customer we went into a number of years ago, and we saw that the output trays had stacks of paper, and there was a build up on the cabinets and the desks beside the MFDs and the print areas that they were operating in. And we put in our own recycling bins into place. And over a 2-week period, we physically collected those documents and put them in where they weren't collected by the end user, and we put them into the bins. We went back then to that organization, showed them the information that was being uncollected, and they were actually quite shocked. And by putting in the policies that we recommended to them, they closed that gap on the output trays, but they also drove down the costs, because no longer were the end users printing an error or photocopying an error. They were more aware, and again the cost came down because their print volumes had dropped. And again, finally on it, monitor the user trends for step 2. So one thing we advocate as well is having floor champions within your organization. And what the floor champion will do is periodically throughout the year, they will actually just ensure that your print security awareness campaign is being adhered to. And as new staff would come into your organization, they would be the individuals that would actually train them and make them aware of your awareness campaign that you would have in place. And by implementing step 2, you're effectively starting to lock down the data that's going to reside on the output tray. One example we have here is there was a nurse printed a document to the wrong printer, which was on the second floor, and then she reprinted that document to her printer, unknown that the patient records were sitting on another printer on another floor. On the second floor, another nurse took that document and distributed that, and it got filed away. That resulted in 16 nurses being suspended for 4 weeks because of that particular breach that took place. And I've seen it happen in many organizations where a user will click file and print and go to the printer, nothing would be there, and they do it again and they print it out, unknown that they sent it to the wrong queue. And again, on the input trays, you can actually put a physical lock if you want to. So if you've got your special media sitting in a tray, if you don't want to put it into a cabinet, you can put physical locks on those paper trays. You can disable the paper tray so only certain users can print to that particular media tray. So as they will have the option, as an example, to print a tray 2 only, and nobody else would within the organization. And that also stops that special media from being printed accidentally. So step 3, enable all device security features. Change default admin password. So we're looking at the control panel. The control panel won't have an admin username and password on your machine when you purchase it. Straight away, give it its own administrator username and password. Again, you're going to lock that down and stop users physically accessing the control panel of your MFD. One of the things we've seen and we constantly see is the embedded web page. So do this after you get off the webinar. Quickly Google your manufacturer's device that you currently have. It'll come back with the default admin username and password. Put the IP address into your search engine, and then it'll open up the embedded web page. From there, put in the default username and password. If you actually get into your printer by doing that, you've got a massive potential risk on your hands, and you can see that somebody can actually attack your network by going through that printer. And again, one of the examples that we have from one of our workshops that we carry out is we set up LDAP for scanning. So as the user starts to type their name, it automatically appears on the MFD, and then they scan that document then to themselves through scan to email. That requires an administrator username and password, and when you're actually typing that in through the embedded web page, it looks like the password's encrypted because you can't see what you're typing. So we use a Linux server and we actually spoof the IP address of the LDAP server to point to our Linux server that we have running. And then from the tools that we use, most manufacturers today that are out there on the embedded web page, you can do an LDAP lookup or do a test to test to make sure an account is working. And we're from there, we're able to pull down the admin username and password that you're using for your LDAP for our scan to email. Now you actually have an admin username and password to be able to enter your network, and you got that from an MFD that was unsecure because it didn't have a secure admin username and password on the embedded web page. Enable data in transit encryption. So most manufacturers, and like I said earlier, HP have been doing it for years. The UPD is you've got the ability to encrypt the UPD. So on the universal print driver, with encryption enabled, when a user clicks file and print, as that data travels across the network to the printer, you will know that it'll be set to AES 256 standard for encryption. So if you have a man in the middle trying to observe and extract the data or username and passwords, they won't be able to because it'll be fully encrypted. And then set auto arrays on your hard disk drives. So if you have a modern MFD or single function printer that has a hard disk drive, you will have the ability to do this. Some manufacturers will show you a small little icon on the bottom right hand side of the display to show that the hard drive is being erased. Some others, most will bring you up to 3 to 5 different levels of auto arrays, and they go up to the Department of Defense US standard, some of the device manufacturers, to that level for auto arrays. So effectively, after the user is finished photocopying or printing, when the job is finished, you will automatically see the hard disk drive being erased by an icon, or you'll be safe in the knowledge that you know that it's erased. In the event that that device leaves your building, the hard disk drive, there'll be no latent images on it. If the hard drive is taken out of the machine by a field service engineer or maliciously, you will be safe in the knowledge that there will be no information on the hard drive. And by doing so, you're locking down the control panel and you're stopping a potential attacker from changing ports and changing protocols on your devices. Again, you're further enhancing the network security, and with the storage media down with the hard disk drives, you know that they're set to auto erase and they're erasing any potential latent images that may reside on the drives. So step 4, use a vendor approved pull print solution. A pull print solution, and there's many different types out there today, effectively is where you would have two queues. You would have a mono queue and you would have a color queue. And when the user clicks file and print, they can authenticate at any device within the organization that's a pull print enabled, and then they'll have their jobs on the screen, and they can select what jobs they want to print and what jobs they don't want to print. They can delete them and so forth. Again, with the pull print solutions, they'll come with a full suite of reporting tools, so you can see the applications that your users are printing, you can see the number of pages, the mono versus color, but more importantly, if you want to see file names and if you want to see the names of the persons and the time they printed them off, you can see that through your reporting in your pull print solution. So you're building up a database knowledge of how print is done within your organization. You can assign multiple methods of authentication. So with traditionally you would have a PIN number, or you would have a card, or you'd have your Windows login, or you can have a combination like a two-factor where you would have a card and a PIN if you want to. The funny thing when we talk about pins, the amount of times I've gone into organizations and where they're using pin printing, either through a hard drive or even on the pull print solution, and I type in 1234 or 4 zeros and I get straight away into someone's account. If you are in an organization and you are using pull print and you're using pins, don't use 1234 or 4 zeros. Make sure that they're randomly generated. But again, with the newer versions and the advent of the new pull print solutions and where they're moving forward now, biometrics start to come in and they start to figure a little bit more on those. So you're getting that added layer where you've got your fingerprint login if you want to get you into your pull print solutions. Again, by doing so, you're effectively locking down the output tray, so you won't have that build-up of prints sitting on the output tray uncollected. And again, an awful lot of the good pull print solutions out there today will have a mobile printing option. So it will allow you either, if you've guests coming into your organization and they want to print, they can send that job to an email address and then they'll be given a temporary 4-digit PIN number or whatever it may, a card, and they can authenticate as a guest user and pull those jobs down. And again, you're hitting the mobile printing question within your organization, and you're able to keep it outside your network if you want to, because it'll sit on your pull print solution away from the main network. And the big feature would be to capture the scanning. So with a pull print solution, you will have the scan to me functionality. And basically scan to me will lock down the to and the from field when you're scanning. So a user will not be able to type in an email address that they want to scan a document to. They can only scan it to themselves. And again, with the pull print solution, you will have an audit trail of what type of documents, or more or less what user is scanning what documents and when. Step 5. Set fleet-wide security settings and establish and assess the usage policies. So if you look at an organization that will have 50 to 100 printing devices on the network, and potentially you have 250 plus settings in that printing device, it costs IT an awful lot of time having to physically go around each device and change the settings on them. And then you're also going to introduce the human error factor as they're going around all these machines, changing the settings on the devices to lock them down and harden them. HP will have a great software solution called Jet Advantage Security Manager. And what that basically does is you install it on your network, and it'll pull out and pull in all your printing devices, and you can do an assessment, and from the assessment it'll tell you what ports are open and what settings are enabled, disabled, usernames and passwords if they're enabled on your device. And from there you can remediate, so you can define set a clearly defined policy where you can change the username and passwords, and you can literally push that out to all your print fleet. Again, with the likes of this type of software, you're saving your IT and your InfoSec team an awful lot of time, and as you know, for them time costs money. So by doing so, you're saving yourself money and you're saving yourself time. And the great thing with the likes of these software tools is if a new device is added to the network, the policy is automatically pushed down. So again, you're not going to have a rogue printing device that hasn't got the policy applied, and you're removing the user intervention from that device. And again, finally on this, if you're going to be audited or monitored and you're asked, what is my print fleet security policy, you've got you can give graphical reports and a full suite of reporting through the tools that you can give the auditors to show that you're compliant through the likes of these. And again, you're going to be furthering hardening the network, the management, and you do also have the ability to send remote firmware updates to your print fleet. So rather than have to access each printer and remotely push down the firmware to every single one, you can schedule tasks as well through it. And that's what you should be looking for, especially when it comes to your critical security patching, not the general day-to-day firmware updates. So step 6, use data loss prevention software. So we've software that we use, and we set up buzzwords, so you can have PPS numbers, you can have your social security numbers, you can have credit card numbers, whatever. They can be case sensitive, and you can set multiple buzzwords that you want. And in the event that a user clicks file and print, the software basically scans that document and it looks for those buzzwords. And if it sees the buzzword, it'll do one of two things. It'll stop the job from printing out at the printing device if you wanted to, or it'll stop the job printing out at the printer, but it'll also send an email to your designated security personnel, and they'll get an email saying such and such persons printed this document at this time, and the attachment will be the document that they're trying to print. So now you're given the information to actually go back to that person and find out why they were trying to print this particular document. It also applies for photocopying. So you can use optical character recognition. So if a user takes a hard copy document and tries to photocopy it, it looks again for the buzzwords. And if it finds a buzzword, it'll do one of two things. It'll either redact the document so it cannot be read by the user, or you can put whatever customized message you want on the document, like to say, you are unauthorized to print this document, please contact your IT or your line manager for approval, and then they can go to the relevant personnel if they have to get that document printed. By putting the 6 steps into place, you are starting to harden, and you're putting the layered approach for your printing endpoints. And then finally, you've got step 7 on our 7 steps, which is the gold standard. for print security. You can engage an MPS provider that'll give you the proactive 24/7, 365 device monitoring and remediation. So they're going to look at it for you. Because let's be fair, if you're going to have a printer breach, it's not going to be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's going to be the early hours of a morning or over a weekend when there's less staff in place. And if you do get a printer breach or you get an attack through your printers, they'll be able to shut down the printing devices and report to the relevant personnel within your organization to say there's a data breach taking place. And again, they're responding rapidly to any data losses, threats or attacks. If a user prints a document in the early hours of the morning, again, they can be notified and they can inform your security at your desk to say this document is being printed by this person at this time. Can you investigate? And again, you're closing the gaps then. And you've also got security information and event management where it fully integrates and gives you the full suite of reporting if that's what you need. So just to recap, on step 1, include printing your corporate security policy. Do it today and get it in place and assess and don't do the set and forget. Review on a regular basis. Step 2, bring in your end user education and adoption policies and bring your end users into the fold. Make sure that they're aware and they're more conscious of what they're printing and what they're photocopying and the potential costs to your organization from accidental data breaches or data loss from documents that they're printing or photocopying. Step 3, enable all device security features. So again, if it can have a password, give it a password. And don't set and forget. Review regularly what the passwords and change them. And again, when you leave the webinar today, access the embedded web page of your printing devices and see if you can access it on the default username and password. And if you can, change it immediately. Step 4, use a vendor-approved pull print solution. So look for one of the better pull print solutions that will give you the full encryption and the full suite of reporting. And again, it'll bring in the mobile printing as well if that's a requirement that you have. And also look now towards the biometrics for your logins. Step 5, set your fleet-wide security settings and establish your policies. Again, look to the likes of HP Jet Advantage Security Manager that will allow you to assess and remediate your devices on a fleet-wide basis and again saving your IT and InfoSec team time and money by having to do it manually. And for step 6, use the data loss prevention software. So again, look for software that will give you that pure data loss prevention. So it will redact the documents, it will look at the buzzwords, and it will prevent malicious users trying to print documents that they're going to try and take from your organizations. And step 7, engage an MPS provider that's going to give you the 24/7, 365 device monitoring and remediation. If you'd like a print audit, our print security audit conducted, and we'll highlight the risks and vulnerabilities for you. Just contact us on printsecurity@ergogroup.ie. Again, Ergo, we operate across 16 companies from our head office in Dublin, and we also have offices in the UK where we operate from again, and we look and we manage the print security for many of our international customers. At this stage, I'll take any questions that you may have, and I'll try and answer them in the time that we have left. So what are the critical areas to lock down on a print device? When we look at the areas, we don't look at any one area being of less severity. Our attitude is if you have a protocol that's not being used, then it should be disabled. Again, with passwords, if it can have a password, then it should have a password. It's there for function. Don't leave your devices on the default username and passwords that come with your printing device. And again, if you're not using particular like Bonjour, because there's no Mac printing, disable it. Don't have it enabled on your devices. Shut it down and turn it off. What should I do with the hard drives in my old multifunction printers for scrap? Well, the first thing that we recommend you should do, and is what we would do ourselves, is format the hard, get your MPS provider to format the hard disk drive, they should have a sign-off sheet for you, and with the sign-off sheet they'll have the device, the serial number of that device and the device model, and they'll have the hard drive that accompanies that particular printing device, and they'll give you that hard disk drive, and then you can actually securely shred it or physically destroy it yourselves, and that's, you'll be 100% sure and safe in the knowledge that as that printing device leaves your network, there's going to be no data sitting there on the hard disk drive. So I'd like to thank you all for your time this morning, and I hope you've gained some insights on your printing fleet, and you're going to start asking the questions of what you should be doing with your print estate, bringing it into the fold, into security that will allow you to become GDPR compliant for your printing. So thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you again. Thank you. Bye.